At the time of death, after what happens, buried, the gross body becomes food for all the microbes, small insects in the graveyard. So therefore, this food layer is created by food, sustained by food, and goes back as food to Mother Earth. Now we will move on to discuss, as I had mentioned earlier, the five-fold personality layers. These five-fold personality layers are nothing but the same three bodies we discussed earlier. Remember, the gross body, subtle body, causal body. The same three bodies analyzed from a different angle. Just like the latest one is, if you want to get a new product, they give this augmented view. So you can view the product in 360 degrees so that you will have a better perspective. Another example is these five layers we will discuss based on the personality. It's called as personality layers. The example that I was going to say is a person goes to the company and he plays the role of a managing director in the company, because that's his job. He is the managing director of the company. He plays the role of managing director in the company. The same person comes home, he becomes the damaging character. I mean, he takes the role of a husband, or as a role of the father, or role of a son-in-law. Many times it ends up as a damaging character, just a silly joke. Likewise, any country, for the sake of administration, first it divides the country into different states. Then there are different departments, like the air transport department divides the sky into different zones. The rail transport, for its own administration and convenient purposes, they divide them into different zones. Likewise, the same three bodies, gross body, subtle body, causal body, they are divided into five personality layers. Now first I will enumerate what are those five personality layers, and then we will go on to analyze each layer. So the first layer is the food layer. So we will explain what is a food layer, but food layer is the external personality or the physical personality of the person. And that external personality, food layer, is equal to the gross body. Now we know the subtle body. The subtle body will be divided into three layers. The first layer is energy layer, which is the active personality in a person. And this layer holds the power for activity in a person. It's not power of action, it is the power for action. In other words, it is responsible for the acting power, the energy layer. So first is the food layer, second is the energy layer. Third is the mental layer. Mental layer is the emotional personality in a human being, or psychological, you can call it a psychological personality in a human being. And this layer is responsible for the power for desiring objects and being. Again I repeat, it is power for desiring object and being. It's not the power of desire. It is the power for desiring object. In other words, you can call it as desiring power. The mental layer is responsible for desiring power. Then the fourth layer in the personality is intellectual layer. This becomes, most of you already heard it, this becomes your thinking personality or rational personality or judging personality. And this intellectual layer is responsible for power for knowing things or knowing power in a personality. And These three layers, the energy layer, mental layer and intellectual layer, these three put together is the subtle body. Now we have the causal body, and that layer is called bliss layer. Bliss layer, or it's your unconscious personality, you can see. This unconscious personality holds one power. This holds power for suppressing the knowing power, desiring power and acting power. You can say power for inertia, or inertia power, or suppression power. Now again, the order of subtlety applies here as well. The bliss layer is the subtlest, because the earlier analysis we saw the causal body is the subtlest. The next subtle is the subtle body, then the gross body. That was the order of subtlety. Likewise here, of the 5 layers, the subtlest of all is the bliss layer. Then comes the intellectual layer. Then comes the mental layer, energy layer and food layer. So this is the order of subtlety in terms of the 5-fold personality layers. Now we will take up one by one and analyze. Now we get on to the analysis of food layer. Food layer is nothing but your external or physical personality, or the gross body. This gross body is formed by the modification of the food consumed, isn't it? Now let's analyze from where it starts. The food any human being consume, it comes from earth. So the starting point is the earth. Earth produces vegetation, and this vegetation produces food, and that food is consumed by a man who is going to be a future father. And the same food that comes from earth is consumed by the woman who is going to be a future mother. So the future father consumes the food, and he produces the ultimate essence of the food, that is the sperm. Likewise, the future mother, she consumes the food, and she also produces the ovum, egg. Both the sperm and the ovum are product of the food consumed by the father and mother. In fact, it is the best and the final positive modification of food, because that aspect of the food produces the sperm, that aspect of the food produces the ovum, and those two combine, the baby starts to form in the womb. Therefore, initially food becomes the cause for the creation of gross body. Now what happens? The baby in the womb starts to grow. How does it grow? The mother, the conceived mother, takes in extra food, extra nutritious food, and takes utmost care that the food is not contaminated, and she takes care of her own body, and she makes sure the baby growing in the womb gets nutritious food. So that baby grows with food, the body of the baby. The baby comes out, then the mother feeds first, breastfeeding, nutritious food for the baby, again food. Then as the baby grows, first they start with liquid food, then semi-solid food, solid food. Then the baby grows into an adult. Then the adult eats food, he maintains or sustains his gross physical body. So food becomes the cause for creation of the gross body. Again, the same food has now become the cause for sustenance of this gross body. Then the person at one point grows old, then he slows down, everything kind of reverses that as we saw. His food intake reduces, and finally at one point the gross physical body dies. At the time of death, after what happens, buried, the gross body becomes food for all the microbes, small insects in the graveyard. So therefore, this food layer is created by food, sustained by food, and goes back as food to Mother Earth. This is the external physical personality, or the food layer, or the gross body. So with this, the analysis of the food layer is over. The next layer is the energy layer, and this energy layer is the active personality in you. And this energy layer have 10 components. These 10 components you already know. The first 5 components are the power center of physiology that we discussed earlier. They are not the actual gross organ. I am talking about the power behind the gross organ. That's the respiratory system, digestive system, circulatory system, excretory system, and we talked about the emergency shutdown system. Now, the function of these 5 power centers of physiology predominantly is linked to the air that we breathe. It starts with the respiratory system. It's predominantly this combined function of the 5 power center of physiology is linked to the air that we breathe. In a human being, the food intake, average per day, how much one eat. The poor guy, we discussed how the food, poor guy, sometimes he can afford to eat only 1 meal a day. And the ultra rich also eat only 1 meal a day. For the poor guy, he cannot afford, so he eats 1 meal a day. The ultra rich once was able to afford, destroyed the body, then the doctors force them, or they have the knowledge so that they have to cut down on the food. They also eat 1 meal a day. Only the middle class people, they enjoy food, they enjoy 3 meals a day. But you put an average, a human being eat 1 kg of food a day. The food intake may vary, but the average intake of air that one takes inside, that's almost common to all. Either a poor man or an average guy or an ultra rich guy. All three almost takes in around 10,000 to 12,000 liters of air in their system. So and this power center of physiology is predominantly functioning with the amount of the system works in tandem by taking in fresh air in the body, of course, along with the food consumed. Now, this power center of physiology, it generates energy. And generate energy and do what? It has to give it to someone. That energy is consumed by the power center of action. The 5 power center of action, organ of speech, hand, legs, evacuation, reproduction. These 5 power centers of action predominantly consumes the energy that is generated by the power center of physiology. Therefore, these 5 power centers and the 5 power centers of action combined together, the energy layer constitutes these 10 components. And this energy layer, as I mentioned earlier, this energy layer is responsible in the personality to give the power for acting, power for action, or acting power in a personality. Again, these 10 power centers are in the middle, and this acts as a bridge between the gross physical body and the subtle body and the mind and intellect. And I say this power center also is an aspect of subtle body, but I am talking about these 5 power centers of physiology and the 5 power centers of action together forms a communication bridge between the gross physical body, anatomical body, and the mind and intellect. So this is the different aspects of the energy layer that we can discuss of. Next, we will move on to the next layer, mental layer. This mental layer is nothing but your emotional or psychological personality in you, and this constitutes 8 components that you already know. As the name suggests, mental layer, it constitutes the mind, and it constitutes the 5 power centers of perception that you know already. I don't want to enumerate the 5 power centers of perception, and it constitutes the memory and ego. So total 8 components. Now how these 8 components are related, we will analyze. This mental layer is responsible for power for desiring or desiring power. So this desiring power precedes acting power. Without you desire anything, you can't act upon. So this desiring power precedes the power for acting. Now, the mind as such generates lot of desires after desires. We know, we already studied mind is the seat of your emotions and desires. In this case, we are analyzing the desire. So the mind has the capacity to generate more and more desires, and as it generates, it consults with the intellect, and or whether it doesn't consult with the intellect, it passes it on to the organs of action. And the organs of action goes about running the world, takes energy from the energy layer, and keeps on acting to fulfill the mind's desire. That's the job of organs of action, and taking the help of the energy layer, 5 physiological power centers. Now, in a person, the mind keep on generating desire, but how long the body can go on act in fulfilling those desires? So, in a common man, the gap widens. There will be a big disparity between the capacity to act and fulfill desire and the rate at which desires are generated. That is a perennial problem in a human being, and finally any average human being ends up, he becomes a bundle of unsatiable, uncontrollable desires. You know, desires are like, the mind is like, the nature of the mind is to generate more and more desires, and the nature of mind is compared to the nature of fire. No fire in the world can positively say that it had enough of consuming fuel. Any amount of fuel you pour into the fire, it consumes more and more, the conflagration goes up, and still it wants more and more fire. The richest, this is a common saying, the richest man wants to be little more rich. The most beautiful woman wants to have little more beauty. So these are common sayings. Now, how these desires are continuously generated by the mind, with whose help? There comes the support of the 5 power centers of perception. So these 5 power centers of perception, eyes, ear, nose, skin, all, you know that, they are exposed to the world all the time. The moment the 5 are exposed, the world enters through the organs of perception. So you go in, that's how first you see the different objects, and then you want to procure that object and enjoy the object. So the guy who helps the mind is the organs of action, and the 5 power centers of perception, along with the mind, with memory and ego, because you need the help of memory, sometimes the interference of ego, all put together, the mind keeps on generating desires. As such, to have desires is not a bad thing, because all your goals that you set, you remember the 4 sets of goals that we discussed much earlier, the goal for security, the goal for comfort and entertainment, the goal for seeking invisible wealth, and the goal of seeking the infinity. So if you have higher goals, it's okay, desires are okay. So you need to refine your desires, but for you, I don't need to give that kind of education. I presume that you all have set capturing infinity, or to understand what infinity is your final goal. So if you are keeping that as a goal, the rest of the goal takes a backseat, as in fact I mentioned this earlier. So your desires should be refined so that the mind is taught higher values, and the mind comes along with your decisions and move on towards your final ultimate goal of capturing infinity. So this is the mental layer, or physical or emotional personality, or psychological personality. Next we will go on to discuss the intellectual layer, the 4th layer of the 5-fold personality layers.